You have in your body all the time melanoma. However, you've got immune cells. Certain immune cells, like the natural killer cell, goes around and half a dozen times per day, you have enough of them that they go by every single cell in your body. And they check your cells to make sure that they're regular, normal cells. If there's anything abnormal about them, they're going to punch holes in it and kill it. Well, if you get too much UV radiation, if you get a sunburn, what happens is the natural killer cells go away for 1 to 2 weeks. If they go away for 1 to 2 weeks, the melanoma can start replicating. And it replicates very, very rapidly. And it starts out with a single cell, and then it replicates around it so it becomes a ball. When the natural killer cells finally come back, they are able to kill the outside parts of the ball, the tumor. They can't get to the center. And it continues growing and growing and growing. And then it gets cardiovascular. It gets blood vessels into it, and it metastasizes. When it metastasizes, a piece of it will go off, and it will go to other parts of the skin, or here's the scary part. It will go to your brain. And typically when it goes to the brain, you don't get one metastasis to a tumor, you get 15 to 20. And can you do surgery on 15 to 20 tumors in your brain? No, it would not leave enough brain left. It would change you too much physically and mentally. Questions? Now, please do not be like a former student where she was going to the prom and she bought this fantastic dress, she told me. She was a former TA. And she said she had this fantastic dress, except it was a little bit too low cut. It went below her tan line. And so she had to fix that. And so because she was 18, she signed herself out sick. She stayed home. Parents were gone. She went into the backyard and did basically from the belly up a full body suntan. Problem was, I wasn't there. Okay. Problem is, what she told me is that she fell asleep. She woke up 3 hours later. She had a severe sunburn. She was out for the next week and a half because she couldn't wear anything on her upper body. It hurt too much. So please be careful. Another thing that you can get is cataracts. Cataracts are when the lens of your eye are broken down by the UV radiation. Happens very highly. If you know anyone that was in Vietnam War, they didn't oftentimes have UV resistant sunglasses in Vietnam. And oftentimes a lot of those individuals, including one of my brothers, has cataracts. You can't see out of them. What's interesting is in Australia, it's close enough to the ozone hole in the Antarctic that kids are not allowed, elementary kids are not allowed to go outside for playtime without hats on or long sleeves. They have to have those in order to go out. You can have problems with the crops. Why? Because when UV radiation, it's ionizing radiation. It destroys molecules in the plants, in the animals, in the phytoplankton, which we depend on for oxygen on the planet Earth. This is just showing you where it is located on the spectrum. Anything over here is ionizing radiation. Gamma rays, X-rays, and UV will damage molecules. This stuff over here is non-ionizing. We like that, but this stuff over here, it can damage you. And that's just a picture of what leaves the sun, and comes to us. What happens is when it hits our atmosphere, all the way up into the exosphere down, it starts removing this high energy stuff, the B and the C. And by the time it gets down here, most of that is gone. You do have, unfortunately, some vitamin A. No, UVA. UVA is the stuff that combines in your body to produce vitamin D. And we talked about how the Africans have darker skin because of that. Because if you're on the equator, the the atmosphere is smaller there, is thinner, and therefore some of the B and C will get through. Therefore, they have the melanin so that it absorbs the ultraviolet radiation and does not damage the DNA of the skin. How does ozone form? When we finally got photosynthesis on the planet Earth, we finally got oxygen in the atmosphere. Before that, there was nothing living on land. Everything that was alive was in water, because water will filter out the UV radiation. As soon as we had enough photosynthesis going on, we got an oxygen in the atmosphere, and some of it floated up to the stratosphere. And eventually we got enough that they started coming together. And what happens is the oxygen is hit by a photon of UV. And that's enough energy to break the ozone apart. And then that single oxygen molecule joins with another O2 and forms O3. Okay. Looking at it again, graphically, so when the O2 comes in, it's hit by UV, it breaks apart. That comes in and joins with an O2 to form the ozone. And so right now we've taken away an ultraviolet photon. Then, when you have the ozone up there, we have another photon coming in, breaks apart the ozone, so we have O2 and O. Well, this O can do one of multiple things. It can go back with this guy, it can join with this guy forming these, or it can go with another singleton and form O2. So already we've moved 2 photons of UV so that they are not able to come down and attack us. Now, we have naturally an ozone hole. Always been there, where it is thinner over the Antarctic and the Arctic. Why? Because it's cold. When it's super, super cold, the ozone cannot form. And since it's always being broken down, if it can't form during the winter in the Antarctic, some of it goes away. And so it becomes thinner. Always has happened. Now, what's interesting is that the ozone hole breaks down more over the Antarctic. You get more of an ozone hole over the Antarctic than over the Arctic. Why? Where does it get colder, Antarctic or Arctic, and why? Where does it get colder, Arctic or Antarctic? Antarctic. Why? No, it has nothing to do with ozone. Ozone hole is caused because it's colder. Not the tilt. Both of them tilt the same way. Nope, they still both have white. However, what is the Antarctic on? What is the ice on in the Antarctic? Land. What is it on in the Arctic? Water. Which cools off more, land or water? Land. Because it's over land, it cools off more, and therefore it gets colder. And because it's colder, like I said, it cannot reform when it's too cold, and still some of them are being broken down, so it gets thinner. Now, if you look, hold it a second. Why is it getting thinner in August, September? Why is that? Why is it that time and not January, February, March? It's in the southern hemisphere. That's their winter. And why is it bigger in September and not in July? Because just like here, when is it the warmest here? It's not super hot in June, July, August. It's not until August, September, October. It takes a while for the land to warm up. Okay? And that's why it gets the biggest in September. Now, destroying good. This is just looking from 1980 to different times of 1982, before the Montreal Protocol came about. I just love that picture because it shows it a different way, where there is a hole in the Antarctic. Now, what has happened is back in the 1920s and 30s, at that point in time, my grandpa ran a farm. And he had every farmer had a pond. The reason why they had a pond in the Midwest is so that they could cut the ice. He would cut cubes of ice about a foot cube, and they would have an ice house. And in that ice house, they would cover it with wood shavings, and it was the best insulated building on the farm, because that way it would be kept cool through most of the summer. And throughout the summer, when the ice chest ice was gone, they would go out and get another chunk, put it on top of the ice chest in the upper portion of it, and the cold was seeped down to keep some of the food from going bad as fast. But in 1928, there's something came about called CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons. Chlorofluorocarbons were developed by DuPont so we could have refrigerators, so we could have air conditioners. It wasn't until 1974 that some scientists discovered, hey, this is not a good thing. CFCs break down ozone. But did anyone believe him? No. It wasn't until they started making observations that they were able to determine. In 1985, they were able to do a survey because of the pictures. It wasn't until that time that we had pictures showing the ozone depletion. And this is the scary part. It was 1987 when the 1987-89 when the Montreal Protocol. But chlorine is able to stay up there a long time because it's a catalyst. It catalyzes the breakdown of the ozone. And therefore it's going to cycle a long, long time before it goes away. And so, again, when it happens, the sun comes down, uses up a photon, breaks apart the chlorine from the chlorofluorocarbon, comes down and breaks apart the ozone, and it does this over and over and over and over again. Keeps on doing it so that even though we don't have CFCs anymore, it keeps on doing it. If you look here, you can see that the dates start in 1980, go up to 2004, and it's not much better now. And what happened is from 1980 through here, you can see it's getting larger. But has it shrunk much? What is the year where it actually didn't shrink as much? Is it as big of a hole there? What do you think happened in that year? Why it didn't shrink as much? What causes the ozone hole to happen is super cold. So what do you think happened with that year? It was warmer. The year was warmer, therefore there was not as big of a hole formed. We had the Montreal Protocol, which is responsible for getting rid of all the CFCs. And if you look here, for all the things that deplete ozone. If we look here, by 1990, the number of compounds that get rid of ozone was decreasing. It wasn't until about 2000 that we were back down to basically ground level. This is just looking at the amount of chlorine that was being released. This is the scary part. This is if we look here, come on. If we look here, it's going up in the 70s, it gets to 1990, and it's starting to plateau. But is it going down? Why? Because the chlorine can stay down there. However, what do you think would have happened if we had continued using CFCs? It would have gone off scale. and we'd have an ozone hole over the whole planet, which is beyond scary. Any questions?